and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Saint Faustina, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Let's go on to the next section today, 18.2. We learned about viruses, what they look like, how they reproduce. Jump on the blinds when you get a chance so we can see the slide a little easier. So the title, I know it's kind of hidden, but it says Viral Structure and Reproduction. That's the title of this. Viral structure and reproduction. So the key concept is that viruses exist in a variety of shapes and sizes. So we're going to look at some of the major and most common shapes of viruses, but there is quite a wide variety of them. And those shapes determine how they reproduce. Can you find your notebook? Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. You know, yesterday I showed you the video of the virus infecting a person's cell, and you had the protein spikes that were like keys. And so some viruses are shaped that way, where you have these spikes that come out that are like keys. They can go into the cells, and so that lets them unlock the cells and go into the cells. Other viruses have needles on them, and they inject DNA into cells. So it just depends on their function, how they reproduce, how they're shaped. But their shape lets them function in a certain way. And basically all a virus is going to do is hijack a cell and make that cell make more of their own viruses. And so they're designed to just do that. They're designed to carry DNA or RNA into cells and make the cells into a factory to make more viruses.
So does that only make the virus?
Yeah, it depends on the way the virus is programmed, but generally, yes. I mean, we'll look at different things that can happen, but that's the goal of a virus. It's just to make the cell make only viruses and nothing else.
Well, like, can the virus like get out of the cell, or is it always gonna be?
It would then burst out of the cell. So what would happen is the cell makes more and more viruses, millions of them, until the cell bursts and just releases the virus into the body, and then those all infect other cells, and it just continues from there. And so that's why they're hard to treat.
So is the reason why viruses are bad for you and why you're immune system is strong for it is because they make your cells burst?
Yeah, that's right. They destroy your cells, and they make your cells not work anymore. So they change how your cells work. They override your cell's DNA, and so your cell can't make any protein except the virus protein. That's all your cell does at that point, is it just makes more and more viruses and nothing else. So your cells stop working properly, and then the virus destroys your cells. It makes them burst open.
The reason you feel sick is just because your immune system.
That's the main thing. It depends on the kind of virus you have, but yes, your reaction to a virus, your runny nose, your fever, that's your immune system reacting to the virus. But then like a sore throat, well, that's actually the virus attacking, your cells and making them inflamed and making them, they're sore at that point. And so it depends on the nature of the virus, but generally it's going to start to destroy your cells, which does cause pain, along with inflammation and swelling and sometimes bleeding. Like Ebola, for example, that virus makes your blood vessels really thin, and eventually they start to bleed out, and your blood vessels just can't hold blood anymore. And it's a very, very deadly disease. Most people die from Ebola because of that reason, that the blood vessels just get so thin. They're just, the cells are just destroyed to the point where you just bleed out. And usually a few days. It's really very fast. Malaria is kind of like that too, where it attacks your blood cells and it makes them burst. So with malaria, you get chills, and the chills that you feel with malaria is millions of blood vessels or millions of blood cells dying all at once. Your blood carries heat throughout your body, and so when you lose blood, you lose heat and you get cold. So that's what you feel with malaria, is just a coldness and a chill when your blood cells are destroyed.
Is that what chills are when you're sick?
Not usually. No, usually it's not. But with malaria, that's what chills represent. But usually with a chill, it's not that dramatic. I mean, you're constantly losing blood cells all the time, but it's usually not a lot of blood cells you're losing that causes a chill. when you're sick, you have a higher body temperature. Your thermostat is raised.
Yeah.
And because of that, you're going to feel cold more easily because you have now a higher baseline. And you instead of 98 degrees for your baseline temperature, now it's maybe 101 degrees. And so things are going to feel colder to you than normal because of that. Let's see. So these are some of the basic shapes of a virus. And again, they differ in shape just because they have different ways to go into the cells. And that's why they're shaped in these various ways to gain access to cells. So some of them, like these ones, for example, they have small keys that unlock the cell membrane and they enter into the cell that way. And so these are designed to enter into cells. These three ones are. This one, though, is not. This one stays outside the cell. This one instead has needles that attach to cell membrane and they inject DNA into the cell, but the virus itself stays out of the cell. So this attacks bacteria cells. This one does right here. The other two attack eukaryotic cells like plants, animals, and human cells.
We need to write.
The different shapes, I think it'd be good. Do we go through this in detail or not? I guess we don't, which means, yeah, you should know this one. Yeah, so go and write these down. So these are some of the common shapes that you see. So you can see a polyhedral one where you have several sides. You might have heard about, like a decagon, for example, it has 10 sides to it. And you just see different several sides, several faces to this, along with spikes that come out of it. And these are the proteins. And these attach to the cell membrane, and then they can enter the cell through that. The adenovirus this is basically a cold virus. It's usually pretty mild. So some vaccines use, like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine with the COVID vaccine, it uses this to transmit RNA into your cells. And the RNA then makes the spike proteins that are on the COVID virus, so your body can then recognize them in the future. So it's used commonly in medicine. If you want to use a virus to transmit DNA or RNA to a person, that is a very mild virus that doesn't really hurt you. They use adenoviruses to do that. And then influenza, this causes the flu, looks like that. COVID looks like that too. And you can see that it's this ball shape called spherical. So even though it's a little bit different, it's the same basic shape where you do have some kind of a ball or, decagon shape, and you have these little spikes that come off of it. Then you also have a helical shape. Basically, it's just spiraled. This is the tobacco mosaic virus. So that's the tobacco plant virus. So some viruses only attack plants. And then you have over here a complex shape. So some look like machines, some look like spiders. Like this one looks like a spider to me. Has these legs that come out of it. And these attach, they hook on to the cell membrane. They grab onto it. And so these legs grab onto the membrane. They have these needles right here that inject DNA into the cell membrane. And the bacteriophage attacks only bacteria cells. And it holds the DNA up here in this part. And then when it's injected, the DNA travels through this tube, the needles into the cell. But it stays in the outside of the bacteria cell. So these ones don't infect humans. They don't infect animals or plants. They only infect bacteria. These are the ones that infect humans.
Is there like a chance where like the virus can't get into your cell? Or is there?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. If it doesn't have the right key, like if these don't unlock your membrane, then yeah, it can't get into your cell. And so sometimes you don't have the right key to unlock your cell membrane. And so they stay on the outside and you don't get sick. Actually, most viruses are that way. Every day you touch viruses that don't get into your body. They don't have the right key to get in. Your body can just kill them really fast.
So different people have different like things in their cells. So like
Mhm.
people will come like why when they Like, so they're not, some viruses do not have the keys for humans, or does it?
Yeah, that's right. Some don't have the right key. And some of it is just that your body is just a strong immune system that can kill them really fast. And so sometimes your body recognizing it's a virus and kills it really quickly. Other times it's just, it can be in your body, but without the right key, it can't do anything. And it just stays in the outside of your cells, at which point it's harmless to you.
So, do they always have the same keys, have specific virus, and always have the same, like,
Yeah, I mean, it can mutate, like, you know, like the COVID virus, they're kind of concerned about it mutating its keys. And you know, that's what you hear about the different variants. There's a South African variant, there's a Brazilian variant. And they've mutated, they've changed these a little bit slightly on here. In which point your body might learn one key that can deactivate. But let's say you go to Brazil, there's a different COVID virus that has a different kind of key. Your body might kill the American COVID virus with that key. If you go to Brazil with a slightly different key, they might gain access to your cells in the Brazilian virus and not the American virus. So that is a concern. Now, at this point, they're not sure exactly how effective your body is at fighting off, say, the Brazilian form versus the American form. But it seems like your body has a hard time fighting the Brazilian form than the American form if you've already been sick with the American COVID virus, because they are different enough, your body might not recognize that. And so, yes, the viruses strains can change the key, which if they change enough could actually create an infection again. And that's one reason why people get infected again with COVID, is they might have a different strain of the
so
virus.
different places on the cell, because like, it has a different, like key thing, it wouldn't go in the same place, right?
That's right, yeah,
Are there different places that are different shapes?
exactly. Mhm. But without a cell surface, you have thousands of different locks. You know, so within a particular cell, that key might not fit that one place, but right next to it, there might be a lock that it can fit into. And so a cell is quite large compared to a virus with lots of different keys on it that can fit into it. So viruses have a very simple structure. Again, basically it's just a protein capsule with spikes on it, generally with DNA or RNA inside it. Genetic material, DNA or RNA, either one. Just depends on the kind of virus you're dealing with. You know, like the AIDS virus, HIV, contains RNA. But other viruses, you know, like COVID contains DNA. So they just differ. And then the capsid is a protein shell. So the capsid on here is just, you can see it's in blue along here. It just holds the DNA or RNA in place. It helps create the structure of the virus. And then some have a lipid envelope. It's a protective outer coating. And this lipid envelope, though, breaks down easily with soap and also with heat. And that's why viruses don't do so well in the summertime. Lots of times we don't get colds or flu as often in the summertime. And one reason why is that heat breaks down lipids very easily. You might see this when you cook something. You know, like cooking, involves oil and fat. Well, those are lipids. And with higher temperature, they break down more easily. If they cool down, you get solid. You might see, if you fry bacon, for example, if it's hot, it's liquid fat. But once it cools down, you get solid fat. And so viruses, it's a similar way. If you heat it up high enough, it becomes, slimy. It falls apart. It doesn't stay together.
Is it an either or is it one of both?
Is it either a capsid or a lipid?
Yeah.
No, it could be both. Or it could be just the capsid. They all have a capsid. Some also have a lipid in addition to a capsid.
So when the lipid's broken down, can it split in if the capsid is like protecting it still?
The capsid kind of falls off at that point. Like if they have a lipid outer layer along with that, it kind of falls apart pretty quickly if you remove the lipid layer.
What if it doesn't have an envelope? How is it still together?
Then it can stay together because the protein is just thicker and more durable, but it is quite prone to falling apart too. Lipid layer gives it added protection. Without that, it will fall apart more easily in many cases. But yeah, viruses are pretty fragile. They do fall apart very easily. And that's why they have to make so many of themselves. That's why they are designed to make millions of them per cell, because they are so fragile and so easily deactivated.
So could you like get a chemical that just makes all viruses fall apart?
Yeah, you definitely can. But we don't have that chemical to make every virus fall apart without also hurting your cells. And so if in your body, that's what your body does though, is it finds the right chemical to deactivate or neutralize the virus. And once it knows that, it remembers it in the future, it just gives that chemical to the virus and it destroys the virus. So your body is the best defense against viruses because it can learn what chemicals kill a particular virus because they differ from virus to virus. So there are chemicals that are safe in your body that won't destroy the cells, but do destroy the virus. But the chemicals that we know of that would kill all viruses would hurt the cells. And so we don't have one, universal chemical that would kill every virus. It's very specific from virus to virus as far as ones we can use safely in the body. But so really with viruses, our best defense is just let the body find out how to kill the virus. We don't have good medicine to kill viruses. So for the most part, we can't do much. If you have the flu, if you have a cold, you can't really do much for that. I mean, you can take decongestants like Sudafed, you can take cough drops, but as far as actually having real medicine that can kill the virus, we're pretty limited in what we can do to kill a virus in our body. Our body cells are the best medicine for the virus. They can figure out how to kill the virus. Sometimes they don't though. Sometimes people do die from the flu. And when they do, it's because the body couldn't figure out how to kill the virus in time. Most time though, the body does figure it out and you get better. But the flu can be deadly in certain situations. You know about COVID, that can be deadly. So viruses can be very serious sometimes when the body can't figure out how to kill the virus in time. Again, we have things like Tamiflu that can help kill the flu virus. Remdesivir can help kill the COVID virus, but we don't really have good options. Let's go. Are they doing Easter egg on outside? I guess they are. Let's see. Now we already wrote this down, so don't write anything, but I just want to go through some, some of these that are for the enveloped virus, for example. That's from, that's the flu virus, influenza. Helical virus. I mentioned the tobacco mosaic, one that destroys tobacco plants. Also, there's a rabies virus that's helical. So rabies can affect animals or humans. Foot and mouth disease. Have you heard about that one before? That's usually in kids. So that's a capsid virus. And the bacteriophages, as I mentioned, they infect bacteria only. So the DNA is kept in this capsule up here. You got a protein capsid, which is on the outer layer that holds DNA in place. You can see how they attach to the bacteria. So this whole thing right here, looks like a burrito. That's the bacteria, and this is the membrane, and the legs just hook on to the membrane. They might even stick into a little bit like needles. And then right here, they have these injections. You have these needles that like shot that injects this DNA into the bacteria. And you can see this is an actual microscopic picture of what that looks like. And so each little green thing is a virus. And you can see sometimes you can get multiple viruses on one cell. Yeah.
What does the foot and mouth virus do?
Let me check really fast before I say anything about that. I mean, I believe it's just what it sounds like where you get infected.
I need Bella, is she?
Yeah, she is. She's right there.
They're gonna come pick her up.
Okay.
Isn't it like rashes on your feet?
That sounds right to me.
I know people who die.
So it also infects animals. Yeah. So it can, wow, yeah, blisters in your mouth and on, yeah, exactly right. On your blisters on your feet, on your mouth. It can be serious with animals, not as much with kids, but a lot more serious with animals. But yeah, with humans, it's not, I mean, it's kind of gross, but it's not usually anything to worry about. See, we have that down. So we can see in here that they pierce through a bacterial cell wall and they inject DNA into the bacteria.
So if you have like rashes or blisters in your mouth, how do you eat?
Yeah, it's difficult sometimes. I mean, yeah, you kind of, sometimes you just like get smoothies and sometimes you can't. I mean, it depends on how bad it is, but sometimes you cannot chew and you have to get your food through liquid. You have to, blend everything up into and eat and drink smoothies and, pudding and yogurt and things like that. Sometimes that does happen.
Would it be kind of like cold sores on the inside of the mouth?
Yeah, kind of like cold
Is it
sores.
uncomfortable? Do you think like it's just uncomfortable?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how bad it gets. I mean, so in mild cases, you can still eat, but in more severe cases, you might not be able to eat normally for a few days. I could just, yeah. Sometimes you might just have to, again, just have soft things like ice cream and yogurt and, things like that. So this shows you, we already wrote these down, but this just shows you the life cycle of a virus for bacteriophage. You can see right here, the DNA is in red on here. And so first it's in the capsule, but then it injects it into the cell. And now the DNA is inside the cell, it tells the cell to make more viruses. And at this point, it's just a factory now for more viruses. And you can see they just all form and eventually they burst the cell. At this point, the cell is burst, they come out and they go and find more cells to infect. They just keep on repeating the process until either they're killed or the cells are killed. And that just shows you just another picture of the same exact thing of what happens. One virus goes in, infects it, they make more viruses, they burst the cell and just keeps on going in a cycle. But for eukaryotes, which are human cells, animal cells, plant cells, there's a different way that viruses infect, and it's through endocytosis. The virus actually enters into the cell membrane. As we can see in this picture, you have viruses actually going into and out of the cell. So they are produced into the cell, or they are produced in the cell and they come out of the cell. So the cell welcomes them in, the virus then overtakes the cell, it makes more of its own kind, and they go back out of the cell and they infect more cells that way. Sorry. So this right here shows you got viral DNA going into the nucleus down here. And it's going in the pores of the nucleus. And then that DNA then makes more proteins that create a virus. And right here, this is creating the virus, which is then sent out to infect more cells.
So like through the outer layer and the spectrum and everything, those remain on the outside. Or...
They do. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this just shows you another way of how they enter. You can see right here. So the cell membrane just engulfs it and brings it in. And then it starts to break down. The DNA then goes to the nucleus and it creates more viruses at that point. And they just come out through the membrane. And you see the spike proteins that are out here that then go around the membrane of the virus. So this is the lock. The red is the lock, and this is the key. So this green thing is the key that lets them enter through here.
Does does the cell already have the key with it too?
It does have both. Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
like a virus?
So I mean, it depends on the kind of cell you're talking about, but lots of cells are going to have both. They're going to have a variety of proteins of different shapes.
So will they use those, or will the DNA then produce more of those protein on the outside? Or are the other
So it can do both. It can make its own protein spikes, or it could get some from the cell. It just depends on the kind of virus that you have. But it can, yeah, it can either get some from the membrane or it can make its own. There are two main kinds of infections from a virus. The lytic infection we've been talking about so far, where you have a virus that infects a cell with its DNA, and then it makes more viruses, and then the virus is dispersed. So that's the lytic infection, and that's what we see in bacteria and bacteriophages. So we're gonna look just at that for right now. So bacteriophage attached to the host, injects DNA into the bacteria. Now the DNA stays as a circle, like a plasmid out here. And that plasmid then starts to make more and more viruses. We can see it right here, they're assembling. With enough viruses, they burst the cell, they come out, the cycle repeats itself. So that's the lytic infection. So the lytic infection, you have the DNA that stays separate from the other bacterial DNA. And so that's one important thing to keep in mind with this one, that you have DNA separate from the bacterial DNA. The other infection type doesn't have that. They actually mix the DNA. We'll talk about that in a second. But for this infection type, you have separate DNA that's viral and bacterial. And then the other thing is that you get a bursting of a cell. So those are the two things to keep in mind for the lytic infection. The other kind of infection type is lysogenic. And this kind, the cells don't burst. So there's no immediate harm to the cell, which means that you could have a virus in your body for years and you wouldn't be sick from it. It wouldn't be harming you.
Is the herpes virus like that?
Herpes can definitely, other viruses can just stay there in your body and not attack. So herpes itself, I don't believe it's lysogenic like this, but it is that virus that can live in your body and just not attack your cells. Most people have that, so since you're a baby, most people have herpes from being a baby, adults infecting babies from a very young age. But then you get cold sores throughout your life. That's the virus coming back. Or chickenpox, another example of that, where once you have chickenpox, you have it for life. The virus never leaves your body, but it stays dormant in your body for most of the time. But when it does come back, what do you get? Shingles. And so that would be if you have a lot of stress in your life, especially, you don't get enough sleep, bad diet, you can get shingles can reappear sometimes because of that. So those are some cases when you can get a virus that reappears. It's still in your body. It just doesn't attack all the time.
What's the difference between shingles and chickenpox?
So chickenpox would be your first infection, your primary infection. Shingles would be another infection you get after chickenpox. It's the same virus, but it's usually worse. It usually causes more severe symptoms. It usually is very painful. It can cause nerve damage, worse skin rashes than chickenpox. It's usually a much worse infection, but it's the same virus, just a more potent infection than the first time you had it.
Is herpes do anything more than just cause cold sores?
No, that's really all it does. It just causes sores. And so that's just all that it does. So it's pretty harmless. It's kind of a pain to have a cold sore, but you have some, but it's just like, it's not going to really hurt you. I mean, it's just kind of annoying, but most everybody has it. I mean, it's hard not to have it. It's very contagious and very prevalent, but trying to just not have stress in your life, trying to get good sleep can help prevent those infections, but there's not always a trigger for those. Sometimes it just happens and you can't really find a trigger for why you have it. So for lysogenic, what happens, and this is bacteria cells we're looking at here. So human cells are not quite the same. And so it's not exactly the same thing, but for lysogenic, this is what happens. You have a bacteriophage that injects DNA into the bacteria cell, but incorporates it into its bacteria DNA strand. So it doesn't make the cell make more viruses. and it doesn't harm the cell. And so the cell can just stay this way for a long time. Now, it might change the way it functions though. So a cell might have a different functioning after this happens, but for the most part, it just stays that way and doesn't usually harm the cell. And then it can reproduce more cells, and the cells will then carry that viral DNA with it. Now, eventually though, this can turn harmful, especially under stressful conditions. So if the cells are stressed, that plasmid right there can pop out into this circle right here. And once it's done that, it's going to become harmful because now that's going to create viruses. And so it can go from being lysogenic to being lytic, where now it's active. Now you're getting an infection. Now it's harming your cells. And so now the cells are now going to make more and more viruses. It's going to affect the cells. The cells are going to be destroyed, and you're going to have an active infection now. And so HIV is another common example of a virus that you can have in your body for a long time, but not have an infection. So it can even be decades sometimes. When you have the HIV virus, you're positive for it. You don't have AIDS. AIDS is the disease from HIV. And so you can be HIV positive, but not actually have any symptoms for a while, where the virus is there, but not actively destroying your cells. And sleep by far is the best thing you can do for yourself. You know, by far the best thing you can do to keep you healthy is getting enough sleep at night. It's a very good, easy way to get sick is not having enough sleep.
So can you get chickenpox again after you have shingles?
Well, it would just be called shingles. I mean, so once you have chickenpox once, the virus stays in your body, but if it reemerges again, it's now shingles that happens.
So like it isn't true that if you have chickenpox once, then you're immune to it?
You are immune to the chickenpox virus. You won't get that again. So once you have chickenpox and you're over it, somebody has chickenpox next to you won't make you have another infection, chickenpox. That is true. But if you get stressed, if you don't get enough sleep, then you can now have the virus activate in your body. It's already there. It's already present in your body. And you can now have shingles.
I see.
So the virus just stays with you for life at that point. Once you're over the chickenpox virus, you still have virus in your body that stays there, that can reemerge and reinfect your cells if you're stressed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're not gonna get sick from chickenpox again because you already had chickenpox. And so it'd be safe to be around people who have chickenpox after you've had it, because you can't get it again. You can't get infected with that virus again. You already had the virus in your body at that point. But it's not active, and so you can't infect other people with it. The virus is not going to, you're not infectious at that point. The virus stays within your body. But usually it's dormant. Usually it's not going to be active. But at times when you're stressed, it can become active again and cause shingles.
I see.
What if you get the vaccine?
Chickenpox vaccine? Yeah, then you would not have shingles because at that point you wouldn't have the virus to begin with. So the virus wouldn't be in your body, and so you wouldn't have that chickenpox virus at all. And so you wouldn't get shingles either at that point.
Is there anything like after shingles, like if you recover from shingles, can you get like?
Can you just get shingles again? Yeah, that's what it would be at that point. It's just another case of shingles. Okay, I guess that's it for this one. So again, the main thing to show right here is that lysogenic can become lytic. You can have lysogenic become infectious and cause harm to the cells. Okay, in your book, it's on page 517. Do 1 through 5 on page 517.